Ime Udoka's highly anticipated return back to Boston and the Garden will come with a lot of high emotions, and Brian Windhorst believes Jayson Tatum shouldn't focus on the MVP. I'm Isaac Agyekum-Harris, and you are watching Celtics Digest, where we give you everything Celtics-related content, news, you name it, and we talk about it right here. Now, before I get into these two articles that just came out recently in the last couple of days, I want you to at least follow and subscribe to the channel if you have not so already. By doing this, actually helps our channel grow and helps you receive more Celtics-related news and content on this channel. Now, getting into these two articles, got to go into this first one. Ime Udoka's return to the Garden will come with high emotions. Now, this one's a little interesting to me because we all know what happened, how Ime Udoka was dismissed after taking the Celtics in his rookie season as a head coach to the NBA Finals, only to lose to the Golden State Warriors at home. And after a solid first year, he got suspended during his whole second year. Joe Mazzulla became the interim coach and, took over, earned the permanent job. And then Ime was released from his duties as a part of the Celtics organization. And we all know what happened. We all know allegedly what happened. It's a big elephant in the room. But this article explains something a little different talking about that. Ime has not been back to Boston just yet with his new upstart Rockets team with a solid young core that's been playing, and they've been building something, anticipating something great. And the Celtics are looking dominant as ever. Jayson Tatum is in MVP conversations. They have Jrue Holiday. Derrick White is coming to his own. And we all know this. This article's focusing on how Ime is trying to move on from that situation and how maybe what are Celtics players or players that played for him in Boston, like Marcus Smart, and what are they all thinking about when he makes his anticipated return to Boston, and how is this helping him move on to his, focusing on now what the Rockets are building. Now, this first quote from this beautiful article written by Mark J. Spears is from Ime, and says, "My Celtics players, they reach out and they have a strong relationship." He said, "My players will reach out and we talk about how proud they're doing, what we're doing. They're proud of him on how he's grown from that first amazing year coaching Jayson Tatum, Marcus Smart, and Al Horford, to taking that experiences to helping these young Rockets grow and kind of, gel." And, and he talks about in this quote, obviously the biggest piece from just being there for only one season was those relationships that we formed. And some of those guys I'll talk to for the rest of our lives. And so there's a close bond you look at back at what could have been, but also understand the impact you had and the relationships you will continue to have going forward. Beautiful quote, beautiful reflection off of what Ime was referring to, talking about how his relationships have not really changed. They still have a close bond with a lot of the former players, and it was shown evidently Ime attending Marcus Smart's wedding earlier in the later half of 2023, in September of 2023, along with Brad Stevens, Joe Mazzulla, and they're all taking pictures together like the band's back together. And Ime explained that those relationships were close, and ultimately, this is why, in my opinion, why Brad Stevens chose Ime. Ime was a respected professional who played 10 years from 2002 to 2012 in the league and overseas. He was a very respected professional. So he was very relatable to the players, and in my opinion, also to another video we can talk about, which is why there's a difference between the relationships between him coaching as a head coach rather than Brad Stevens, because Brad Stevens was an elite guy. He was just honestly a good coach. But Ime was a respected NBA player. Players respected him because he has a lot of experience. He was one of them at one point. So, he was a player's coach that ultimately, and, that showed kind of what the relationship was kind of all about. Another interesting quote that defined what the relationships that kind of will bring this whole chapter of him coming back to Boston become very emotional, is this quote. But from Marcus Smart, former player and current Memphis Grizzly. Ime's great. Obviously, under the circumstances, we didn't get to give it another run, and it really showed. Former Celtics guard Marcus Smart told Anscape, for somebody as a first-year head coach to come in, take the team that he had with Boston, and not only go to the finals, but halfway through the season be right at 500, and then take the team to the finals, that's not really heard of too often, and it isn't. Only a couple of coaches, only 5 coaches have done that, taking a team to their NBA finals in the rookie season, and you don't really hear that too often. And we got to give him credit his credit right there. We built a special relationship. That's true. Marcus Smart, what he said was on point and very true and very accurate. Ime Udoka is one of the 5 listed coaches that can take a team in his first year as the head coach of a team to an NBA Finals. It's not very common unless you have a guy named LeBron, but that's a whole nother quote. That's a whole nother story right there. Or if you have a guy named LeBron and Steph Curry, Steve Kerr and Tyronn Lue are the other 2 names on that list. Now, talking about that's very special. So on that title run, you kind of build a lot of relationships. You kind of build that trust in those bonds, and you can only imagine and talk about saying, hey, if only X, Y, and Z didn't happen, do we still have Ime? Does Joe never not come in? But Joe's also doing a great job too. So it's a lot of questions that come into that, but it also showed that, it's interesting enough to see how, those relationships are still going. Now, the article also goes into a little deeper, talking about how no one knows what to expect from the Boston crowd. But Ime, we're all going to assume that Boston Celtics fans have their own opinion of Ime, that maybe Ime will just get shown of respect. Maybe they'll do something for him. Who knows? We have no idea what Ime's going to we have no idea what Ime's going to get at that game, but it's kind of interesting to see how that goes. Now, moving on to our next topic, speaking of, one of the players that he built a very close relationship with, Jayson Tatum. Got to talk about this. Brian Windhorst believes that, Jayson Tatum shouldn't worry about the MVP. Interesting take here. And I know that we're on the industry talking about hot takes and everything, but, I gotta show you this headline too. This was written by Clutch Points, but also on NBA Today. Brian Windhorst, famous ESPN reporter, NBA reporter, kind of just threw this out here saying, Jayson Tatum's MVP chances get Brian Windhorst's reality check. Brian Windhorst ultimately doesn't believe that, Celtic star Jayson Tatum has a realistic chance of winning the MVP. Now, before you guys get all crazy and start blowing up the comments on everything that's going on with that statement, Brian Windhorst actually brought up an interesting point. He doesn't believe that Jayson Tatum should worry about the MVP race, and he shouldn't even concern himself. The only MVP that Jayson Tatum should be concerned about is the Finals MVP. And here's the exact quote, just to talk about that. There's only one MVP that Jayson Tatum should be worried about this year, and that's the Finals MVP, said Windhorst. I don't think he's going to be able to win the regular season MVP because he struggled in the finals 2 years ago, and they disappointed in the playoffs last year. While that's not this season, that frames a discussion around him, which is a very, very interesting take. Talking about him, Jayson Tatum can't get it done. He's a good regular season guy, but he doesn't have the complete package, which comes to, in my opinion, I feel like media members, even ourselves, always change the bar on what it means to be an MVP or what it means to be a Finals MVP. Now, Brian Windhorst is really correct on this, talking about this, and I truly think, in my opinion, Jayson Tatum should just focus on winning that NBA title and Finals MVP because, well, that would mean more to his legacy than winning a regular season MVP. We've seen a lot of people that win regular season MVPs that can't get it done in the playoffs. One example I can bring up is Allen Iverson, one of the greatest point guards of our generation, of the modern era, and he's got an MVP, couldn't get it done in the finals, and he never only went back. Jayson Tatum has the potential to make maybe multiple finals appearances throughout his career and maybe get multiple finals MVPs. I believe so, and I bet all of you and all the Boston Celtics faithful believe so too. So Brian Windhorst, I kind of agree with him on this, and I'm curious if you guys do too. Now, it'd be nice for him to win the MVP, and that's something we can actually end this whole episode on, is would it be more important for Jayson Tatum to win the MVP or win the Finals MVP? I think it'd be more important to win the Finals MVP rather than an MVP. But you guys can debate about that in the comments, and we'll probably talk about that in another episode another time. But I'm Isaac Agyekum-Harris, and you've been watching Celtics Digest, and thank you guys.